All right, guys. Well, we do have a new, fresh post Week 7 college football AP poll to look at. We're just going to roll through this. The top four remain unchanged. You know, it was interesting. The top four, all massive favorites in their games. I think Georgia, the only one not covering, sitting minus 31 versus Vanderbilt. They end up winning 37-20. But with Georgia and Michigan, guys, it's the same thing literally every week. They're just not facing anyone. The only team that you can kind of argue, Georgia faced was maybe Kentucky, but that was a home game, and we've seen now Kentucky lose again to Missouri. Michigan's faced absolutely no one at all. They're both 7-0. Ohio State coming in at number 3. If they beat Penn State, we would expect them to be the number 1 team in the nation with wins over Penn State and Notre Dame. Obviously, if they lose to Penn State, it's a quality loss, but they would drop down probably to number 8 or number 9. And then you do have FSU sitting at number 4. Some people think FSU should be top 2, maybe 1. That close game against Boston College really holding them back, although they did beat LSU, and LSU seems to be making a resurgence, so that win is getting better. And by the way, Ohio State's win over Notre Dame is looking better and better with Notre Dame's win over USC. But the top 4 remains unchanged. You can see the points for Georgia sitting at 43 first place votes, Michigan with 16, Ohio State and FSU both with 1, but there's going to be some change with the Penn State-Ohio State game coming up. You do have Washington sitting at number 5, so a lot of people I'm sure are going to be angry about this. Washington did receive 2 first place votes. They beat Oregon, so Oregon, you can see, just moving down 1 spot to number 9. You would think Washington would potentially move up higher than that. But I will say, let's not overreact to Washington's win over Oregon. That game could have went either way. You had an Oregon team outgain Washington by like 170 total yards. I didn't even realize it was that bad until I actually looked at the stats at the end of it. Certainly a great win for Washington, and I think Washington at this point has given themselves even a buffer to where they could lose a regular season game, win the Pac-12 championship with how hard the Pac-12 is this season, and still easily make the playoffs. So they're in a perfect position. They've got the current Heisman favorite in Michael Penix Jr., and they're sitting at number 5, and they've also got really good receivers, a solid defense. You do have Oklahoma at number 6. I think that's a fair spot for them. They did move down 1 spot. You could argue that maybe they have a better win than Washington because they beat Texas, who's ranked number 8. Their Penn State also moving down 1 spot. They crushed UMass. Obviously, if Penn State beats Ohio State on the road, you're looking at a top 2 team, like maybe the number 1 team. I don't think they would be ranked that, but they would certainly get votes for it. They would catapult minimum into the top 3. You do have Texas at number 8. Not surprising. Texas's season very likely going to come down to the Big 12 championship game in a rematch with Oklahoma, unless they somehow slip up in another Big 12 game, which seems unlikely considering how down the Big 12 is this year. And then you do have Oregon at number 9. So Oregon's going to have to win out for sure. They already have 1 loss in conference, and they're still a really good team. I mean, they're ranked inside of the top 10 with 1 loss. They're at 9. Moving to number 10, you can see North Carolina entering the fray. They're still undefeated. They did beat Miami by 10 points. They're looking better and better each week. I am still not a believer in North Carolina, but I will say at this point, you can't discount them. They are ranked number 10. We'll see. They do have a few tough games. I believe they have a road game at Clemson. I think Clemson is underrated at this point. I think they probably beat North Carolina, but we do have to respect North Carolina. Bama at number 11, kind of a mixed bag with Alabama. I think Alabama could beat Georgia, but I also think they can lose to LSU if that makes sense. They're very hard to predict. We saw them sitting around minus 17 opening the week against Arkansas. The line gets bet up to minus 19. People, it seems like they trusted Alabama after they covered the spread in 2 straight weeks, and it was looking great for Alabama in that noon window game against Arkansas. Jalen Milroe was 5 of 7 for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns, and then the wheels completely fall off in the second half, and I actually think Arkansas had horrible clock management in the 4th quarter of that game. They very easily could have stolen that game, but they just took way too much time. They got the ball back at their own 5-yard line with 10 minutes left, and they were at a snail's pace. They had to punt it back to Bama, and there's no time left. Then you do have Oregon State. How about Oregon State moving up 3 spots? I still have big concerns with Oregon State. They have a very bad defense, and obviously they don't recruit very well, so I don't think Oregon State is going to finish the season with 1 loss, obviously. They're probably going to lose 3 games, but it still is a great last year for Oregon State. in what is the Pac-12. You do have Ole Miss sitting at number 13. Certainly they have one loss in the SEC. Lane Kiffin, a talented offense with Jackson Dart. You can't dismiss them, so I'm fine with, them being at number 13. At number 14, it is Utah. I just don't think Utah has the offense. I mean, you can respect them for sure, but they're going to get eaten alive once they face some of the better teams in the Pac-12. At number 15, you can see Notre Dame moving back up 6 spots. So certainly Notre Dame, they've really done a good job this year, and they're going to be kicking themselves about that, what was it, week 4 Ohio State game? That's just brutal. I mean, they had that game won. Ohio State, it was 4th and 19. You look at this Notre Dame team, even with the bad loss to Louisville, if they would have beaten Ohio State, they would be a top 10 team, no doubt about it right now. Instead, they're ranked number 15. They did get a very good win against USC. I will say that game was set up very nice for them. Everyone kind of knew USC was a paper tiger. I mean, Notre Dame, they were a 2-loss team, and they were favorites going into that against an undefeated USC, but they did get the job done. They are a very sound, fundamental team, and now they've got a bye week. They're facing Pittsburgh. It should be a relatively stress-free next 2 weeks after 4 straight primetime games for Notre Dame, so they should only move up, and then they have a tough game at Clemson. If they win that game, they're going to move back inside the top 10. So it's been a good year for Notre Dame, just a little disappointing with that Ohio State loss. You do have Duke sitting at number 16. Very impressive win over NC State at home without Riley Leonard. They do need Riley Leonard back badly. They could not throw the ball in that game against NC State. They're at number 16. They still only have one loss. You can see Tennessee at number 17. So it's just the passing offense is really bad for Tennessee with Joe Milton right now. They did, rely on their running game, ball control, and defense against A&M. It's a solid win. They end up covering the spread 20-13, but Tennessee has a brutal schedule upcoming. They face both Alabama and Georgia, and that should pretty much, destroy their season. Maybe if they split in those 2 games, they could still make a New Year's Six bowl, but it's going to be very hard. They're also at Kentucky. That's going to be an annoying game for them. You do have USC sitting at number 18. They're down 8 spots. So yeah, USC at this point, when you look at their schedule, you look at the way they're trending, they're actually lucky only to have 1 loss at this point. They very easily could be 5-2. Caleb Williams, the interceptions, he's still a great quarterback, obviously, but with the defense giving him no margin for error, it's just a really bad situation for USC, so they're probably going to finish with 3 or 4 losses on the outside looking in terms of a New Year's Six bowl at this point. You do have LSU up 3 spots, lurking right now. They crushed Auburn. They've got a terrible defense. We all know that, but they have an explosive offense. They're going to be very annoying for Alabama to deal with. Bama gets them at home, but that'll be a really good game. LSU at number 19. Missouri sitting at number 20, so they immediately re-enter the top 25 after that road win at Kentucky, 38-21. Blew them out in the 4th quarter. That's a nice win for Missouri. Certainly they're a top 25 team at 6-1 at this point. Louisville still ranked, but they completely fall back to number 21. They've had a lot of close games, and then that loss to Pittsburgh, who was, I think they were Pittsburgh was 1-4 going into that game, and you lose 38-21. It's very clear Louisville does not have the talent, and they had a nice win at home against Notre Dame with an energized crowd. We were all concerned about the hangover. That's why I said take Pittsburgh plus the 7.5. And they end up winning. How about Air Force entering the ranks at number 22? This was a team that I thought in the preseason could be a dark horse playoff team based off of their schedule. And unfortunately for them, they just don't face any good teams. So even if they finish 12-0, which right now they're favorites to do so, I'm not saying they're going to do so, but they're favorites to, they would still not make the playoff. They would make the New Year's Six for sure at 12-0, probably a top 12 finish, I would say. You can see Tulane at 23 re-entering the top 25. I guess I can kind of understand it. Tulane beating Memphis, that's a decent win for them. They get Michael Pratt back. They were really good last year, even without Tajay Spears. Iowa at number 24. I mean, yeah, Wisconsin just completely blew it. Wisconsin, if they would have beaten Iowa, we would be talking about them possibly being inside the top 20 in their home game in 2 weeks against Ohio State. Wisconsin loses their starting quarterback. They lose the game. And now Iowa, who literally cannot complete a pass, 10 yards down the field, Now they're ranked at number 24. There's just no way I would have Iowa ranked. They can't complete a pass. I'm sorry. It's nothing against their program. It is what it is. At number 25, it's UCLA. So they're down 7 spots, but they're still ranked. UCLA going through those early struggles with Dante Moore, the multiple interceptions at Oregon State. It's a tough loss, but they are still inside the top 25. You do have James Madison. They would be ranked number 26, so they're receiving votes. They're undefeated right now. I don't even think they can play in their conference championship, though. You do have Clemson getting 35 votes. I would have Clemson ranked. I would have Clemson probably inside my top 20. Florida, I would have Florida nowhere near the ranks. Washington State, Washington State lost like 44-6 at home. You can't rank them. Fresno State, I can understand Fresno State getting a shout out, but they did have a close game with Utah State. Liberty, they've had a really good start to the year, although they faced no one. Kentucky with 4 votes after getting trounced in back-to-back weeks. I don't know about that. Wyoming only lost to Air Force by a touchdown, but they have 2 losses now. Kansas, they fall off, not surprising considering they lost to Oklahoma State. West Virginia, they suffered a loss, but they still got a vote. Oklahoma State, Oklahoma State's now 4-2. Maybe they'll re-enter the top 25, and then Miami getting a vote somehow. Maybe Mario Cristobal might have hijacked the poll and voted Miami into the top 25. But either way, guys, the key thing here going into next week, if Ohio State beats Penn State, are they the number 1 team in the nation? I would say assuredly they should be, considering they would have wins over Penn State and Notre Dame. That's 2 top 15 wins. If Penn State beats Ohio State, Penn State sitting number 7 right now, so that's a 3v7 game we're getting. Penn State number 7 at Ohio State number 3. There's a lot of people that believe Penn State is better than Ohio State, even though Ohio State's probably going to be about 5.5-point favorites going into that game. If Penn State beats Ohio State at number 7, will they potentially jolt up inside the top 3, inside the top 2? I don't think Penn State's going to be number 1 because they don't have that second great win. It would just be a crazy good road win at Ohio State, but after that, Penn State's really had an easy schedule. You could say the West Virginia game, but West Virginia is going to fall back to the pack, guys. They're already 4-2. They might finish 6-6. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in terms of that. But guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on X. Link to that's always in the description.